Hello everyone, I'm welcome back to TechBlock. Today we're going to be doing a keyboard comparison video between the Razer Huntsman Elite optomechanical gaming keyboard featuring the Razer purple switches and the newly released Razer BlackWidow Elite mechanical gaming keyboard featuring Razer's green switches. I'm going to be doing a sound test for each of these keyboards as well as comparing the RGB lighting effects on both of them as well. I'll also talk about the pros and cons of each keyboard really. Hopefully by the end of this video you'll be able to decide which of these keyboards you like more, I guess. I'll leave links to both the keyboards in the description down below for you on Amazon as well as the Razer store, and the unboxing videos of both the keyboards are also going to be in the description down below for you. But now that that's all out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at the Razer Huntsman Elite keyboard first. Alright, so here we have the Razer Huntsman Elite keyboard. I've been using it for well over a month now, I think. It has been fantastic. By far my favorite keyboard out of all the keyboards that I've used so far from Razer, I guess. But this one here is fantastic in my opinion. It has a freaking RGB wrist rest. It's got RGB all over the keyboard, in fact. This wrist rest is detachable and the wrist rests on both the keyboards are very similar, but at the same time they're quite different. This one's RGB, whereas the one on the BlackWidow Elite isn't RGB at all. So we can pop the wrist rest on just like that and the RGB lighting continues on without any problem at all. The entire keyboard is made out of an aluminium construction. It feels very high quality, very heavy, very sturdy keyboard in general. A massive improvement over Razer's plastic keyboard bodies in the past. I think my favorite part about the Huntsman Elite keyboard has to be the switches. They're the Razer purple optomechanical switches. They are genuinely fantastic, but that's mainly up to like personal preference really and what kind of switches you like. I personally love these switches. They're super light to click with a 45-gram actuation force, and generally they're just fantastic. They sound really nice in my opinion, and just using the keyboard day to day has been fantastic. These optomechanical purple switches are very, very special though. They're rated for 100 million keystrokes each. Every single key on the Huntsman Elite keyboard has a built-in stabilizer bar, reducing any potential wobble, as well as allowing you to press the key down from like any corner and it will still sound the same and it will still feel the same thanks to the stabilizer bar. And on top of all that, there's a reason why these are called the optomechanical switches. These switches are activated by light, allowing the signal to be sent quite a bit faster than a standard mechanical switch, and by quite a bit faster I mean a couple milliseconds. Another thing I really like about this keyboard has to be the multimedia buttons as well as the multifunction dial. They are fantastic. I use them every single day to skip songs on Spotify, for example, to adjust the volume. You can even reprogram the dial to do various things like scroll through your Adobe Premiere timeline, increase or decrease brush size in Photoshop, and just anything you want really, as it is programmable to do whatever you want. Part of the dial kind of sticks out of the keyboard though, and some people weren't really a big fan of that. They kind of said it looks ugly, I guess. But in my opinion, I think that's actually a good thing that it sticks out of the side of the keyboard, because you don't have to reach over top of the keyboard to actually adjust the volume on your PC, for example. You can kind of just reach over to the side of the keyboard with your hand and adjust the volume on your PC, for example. It's a pretty cool feature and I really like the way they've actually implemented it into the keyboard, but it's not perfect. There are some actual problems. So each of the multimedia keys as well as the mute button on top of the dial aren't fully backlit. So there are LED lights beneath the actual keys and the mute button on the dial, but there's no light actually shining through the keys. So when it's dark, it's kind of hard to see which keys are fully backlit, I guess, as you can't actually see the icon on the keys at all because there's no LED backlight through them for some strange reason. Razer for some reason overlooked that on both the Huntsman Elite and the newly released BlackWidow Elite as well. Both of them have this problem. The RGB lighting on this keyboard is absolutely insane. Probably the best RGB lighting you can find on a keyboard. There are 20 customizable LED zones for the underglow on the wrist rest, okay? Another 38 customizable LED zones on the keyboard, and then every single key on the keyboard, except for the multimedia buttons, are also individually customizable. So you can make every single key on the keyboard a different color if you wanted to, but for the multimedia keys, you can only set all three of them to one color. You can't customize the color of each one of them for some strange reason, but you do need two USB ports to fully power the keyboard. One for the backlighting on the actual keyboard and the keyboard itself really, and the other one for the underglow lighting for the keyboard and the wrist rest as well. Speaking of the cables and stuff, the keyboard does come with a very thick braided cable that terminates into two USB ports at the end. The keyboard has no pass-through ports at all, no USB pass-through, no audio pass-through. There are also no dedicated macro keys on the keyboard at all. However, you can set any of the keys to be a macro key in the Razer Synapse Free software. But getting back to the keyboard cable, one thing I found quite weird on this keyboard is that the keyboard wire doesn't come out of the middle of the keyboard. It kind of comes out of like the right middle of the keyboard. Like, I don't really understand why they've done this. The cable management that I've currently done for the keyboard, because I do have a hole drilled in my desk to route the keyboard wire through, it kind of looks a bit weird now because the keyboard wire kind of comes out and then goes like at an angle into the desk. But apart from that, that's pretty much going to sum up my little review of the Razer Huntsman Elite keyboard. Awesome RGB lighting, unfortunately no macro keys and no pass-through ports at all. Taking a look at the Razer BlackWidow Elite keyboard, it's actually quite a bit different than the Huntsman than I originally thought when I first bought the keyboard. I thought that the actual top plate of the keyboard would be identical, but turns out the Razer Huntsman Elite uses a matte aluminium top plate, whereas the Razer BlackWidow Elite uses a military grade metal top plate, which is actually quite a bit different than the Huntsman Elite one. This one definitely has more of a matte finish and feel to it. It's still quite cool to the touch though, because of course it is metal. It's quite fingerprint resistant. You can put your fingerprints all over it and they disappear within seconds really. The dimensions of the Razer BlackWidow Elite are also quite a bit different than the Huntsman Elite. You do have a little bit more space on both the left and right hand side. Another thing I noticed whilst using the keyboard is that there's less of a gap in between the keys here. So the arrow section and the keys above them, there's less of a gap between this whole section and the sections to the left and right of it. Like if I try to stick my finger and actually try to touch the metal top plate on the keyboard, I can't. Whereas on the Razer Huntsman Elite, I can do that with no problem. So there's been a minor change there. Also, I noticed that the metal stabilizer bars found on the larger keys on the keyboard, not every key unfortunately, but the ones found on the larger keys like the spacebar are actually like matte black instead of them being like silver on the Huntsman Elite. So that's kind of a nice feature. It makes them a lot more stealthy and less like in your face really. And speaking about stabilizer bars and key stability, Razer have taken their existing green switches and upgraded them to now have dual sidewalls on the left and right hand side of the switch. This increases key stability and reduces any chance of any liquids or dust getting into the switch and potentially causing any damage in the future. And these switches are also rated for 80 million keystrokes each. But what I would like to mention is that they don't really feel or sound the same as your standard green mechanical switch found on the Razer BlackWidow Chroma V2. So I've got the green switch here. They're kind of original Razer green switches, I guess. And these ones here feel different and sound different. These have more of like a thumpy sound, whereas the original Razer greens without any of the sidewalls sound like this. So there's actually quite a bit of a difference in between the feel and sound of the switch. These new Razer green switches definitely feel quite a lot more heavier and they feel very different to the Razer purple switches that are found in the Razer Huntsman Elite. The Razer green switches have an actuation force of 50 grams, whereas the Razer purple switches have an actuation force of 45 grams. And trust me, you can feel the 5 gram difference, it's there. So just bear that in mind. These switches do sound different, but I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think of these new Razer green switches. Now let's go ahead and talk about some of the really nice features of this keyboard that makes it better in some ways than the Razer Huntsman Elite. First of all, you have audio pass-through as well as USB pass-through on the left-hand side of the keyboard. Unfortunately, it's only a USB 2.0 port, but you can still plug a mouse into there, a headset, you know, whatever you want really. Any USB device can be plugged into your keyboard, but that does mean that you have to plug in 2 USB ports into the back of your PC if you do want to use that USB pass-through. If you don't want to use the USB pass-through at all, you're fine. You just plug in 1 USB port into the back of your PC and you're good to go. This keyboard also features the multimedia keys as well as the multifunction dial, a feature that I'm sure everyone is going to love if they get their hands on this keyboard. Now let's go ahead and talk about cable management and how to cable manage this keyboard. Now if you have a hole in your desk, you will be delighted to hear that the cable management for this keyboard is fantastic. Honestly, 10 out of 10. Looking at the keyboard from like a top-down view, just straight down on the keyboard, it looks wireless. There are no cables in sight, literally not a single cable in sight. It looks awesome. Like you'd look at the keyboard and you'd immediately think that it's wireless because there are literally 0 wires in sight. But if you pick the keyboard up, it is of course actually wired, but the cable management channels in the keyboard are genuinely fantastic. The keyboard wire doesn't come out of like the actual end of the keyboard. It comes out of like the inside bottom of the keyboard, allowing you to pretty much completely hide the wire that comes out of the keyboard. It's awesome. And speaking of the wire, it's, you know, thick braided cable from Razer. It's fantastic. Very, very high quality cable. And you can even run the keyboard wire out of the left or right hand side of the keyboard if you want to through this included cable management channel built into the keyboard. It is genuinely awesome. Probably one of my favorite features of the keyboard. Now taking a look at the RGB lighting of the keyboard, it looks pretty good. Very similar to the Huntsman Elite, apart from the fact that the Huntsman Elite has freaking underglow and this one doesn't. but it does have an RGB Razer logo, something that the Huntsman Elite doesn't. So the Razer logo is there, but if you use the included optional wrist rest, your RGB Razer logo is gone. But there is a very subtle non-RGB embossed Razer logo in the actual wrist rest padding here. It's super subtle, you barely even notice that it's there. And the wrist rest itself is very nice to use, very comfortable, very soft padding all over the wrist rest. Probably even better than the padding on the Huntsman Elite. This, I feel like, is ever so slightly thicker in a way, and it just feels a little bit nicer to actually use. And if you're wondering how the wrist rest attaches to the keyboard, it just attaches via a few magnets really. Very, very simple, nothing crazy or anything. But both the wrist rest and the keyboard itself have tons of these non-slip rubber pads all over them. So your keyboard is not going anywhere. Like, it is stationary as hell. You are not going to be moving this keyboard around. You don't have to worry about it like moving around your desk by accident. It is very, very stationary thanks to all the rubber pads at the bottom of the keyboard and the wrist rest. And finally, another small change I noticed between this and the Huntsman Elite keyboard is that for some reason the LED lights for the caps lock, your num lock and your scroll lock, and I think the other two keys as well, are noticeably brighter than the lights found on the Huntsman Elite. I'm not entirely sure why exactly the lights are brighter, but they are. Now finally, let's do a dedicated sound test comparison between the Razer optomechanical purple switches and the Razer green switches that have now been like taken to the next level, I guess. So here are the Razer green switches. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed listening to the sound comparison between both of the keyboard switches. Now let's go and take a look at the lighting options for both keyboards. I'll cover all the lighting effects on the Razer Synapse software and I'll showcase them both at once on the table. Let's jump into it. Alright, so let's go and take a look at all the lighting effects. Here we have breathing. Next we have fire. Reactive. Ripple, spectrum cycling, starlight, a static effect, and then everyone's favorite, wave. Alright, so that was all the RGB lighting for both of the keyboards. I covered all the RGB effects that Razer Synapse offers. And before we do a little summary of both the keyboards and finish up the video here, I would like to mention that both of the keyboards come with these awesome stickers here in case you are interested. But now let's do a quick summary of both the keyboards, the pros and cons for each one, and hopefully you'll be able to decide which one of these keyboards you like more, or maybe you don't like either of them at all. So beginning with the BlackWidow Elite, it has a USB pass-through, audio pass-through, a fantastic cable management channel, and the keyboard genuinely looks wireless. If you have a hole in your desk as well, it's 10 out of 10. Very, very nice feature. A very comfortable wrist rest, RGB Razer logo on the keyboard, multimedia keys, and it has multiple switches that are supported on the keyboard as well. You can choose between the Razer greens, yellows, and the orange switches, so much more switch types to choose from, whereas on the Razer Huntsman Elite you can only choose a single switch, and that's the Razer optomechanical purple switch, and that's it. Neither of these keyboards have dedicated macro keys. They both have fantastic build quality. The entire bodies of the keyboards are made out of metal. For the Huntsman Elite, it's an aluminium matte top plate, whereas the BlackWidow Elite keyboard has a military grade metal top plate for the keyboard. Taking a look at the Razer Huntsman Elite, it has probably the best RGB lighting you can even buy on a keyboard thanks to the underglow, and every key on the keyboard is customizable, same with the BlackWidow Elite really. It has multimedia keys, a very nice wrist rest which is also RGB of course. The cable's pretty good. Unfortunately, no cable management channel, no USB pass-through ports, no audio pass-through ports at all. Apart from that, very, very good switches. Probably my favorite switches out of every keyboard I've tried from Razer so far. the optomechanical purple switches from Razer have a 45 gram actuation force. Just the day-to-day typing experience on the keyboard is just very, very nice in general. By far my favorite switches that I've tried so far. And then on top of that, they're probably the best switches Razer have available, thanks to the metal stabilizer bar on every key. The fact that these are Razer's fastest switches as they're activated by light, 100 million click durability on each switch as well. Probably the best switches Razer have on any keyboard. But unfortunately, the Razer Huntsman Elite is only offered in one switch, and that's the Razer purple switch, and that's the only choice you have really. You don't have, you know, any Razer orange or yellow switches to choose from. Instead of the purple switch, it's just the purple switch, and that's it. But that's pretty much going to conclude this video here. I'll be posting another comparison video between the BlackWidow Elite and its previous BlackWidow keyboard, the BlackWidow Chroma V2, in the next couple of days, so be on the lookout for that video to come out soon. But apart from that, I hope you enjoyed watching this comparison video. Hopefully it's been an improvement over my previous keyboard comparison video, and hopefully in the next one I can make it even better than this one. So thank you very much for watching as always, and I hope to see you in another video soon. Goodbye.